It is Sunday, July 27th, and we have a huge show today. This coming week, will be huge. Two more days until the next FOMC meeting. All eyes on Jerome Powell. Will he fold? Will he capitulate to all the pressure the Trump administration's put on him? Well, a federal judge yesterday upping the ante even more. Wait till you see this. Also, the Trump administration taking full advantage this Sunday morning, making sure Jerome Powell hears one last time before Tuesday what they want to see in 2 days, and more stories as well from around the country, including what happens on Friday, August 1st this week. We're going to show you.
The president's been very clear about that. He says he has no intention of firing the Fed chairman. He is putting his viewpoints out there with regard to what interest rates should be, which is dramatically lower than where they are. And, of course, we were up there visiting the renovations and kind of getting a firsthand look ourselves for the extent to which it's been mismanaged. It's a host of issues with regard to the Fed. They've gone negative in terms of a profit loss over the last several years. We don't get those remittances into the federal treasury. We believe on a host of fronts, Chairman Powell has been too late, and the president is doing what the president should do, which is get out there and articulate the views on behalf of the American people.
So the United States is $37 trillion in debt. That number rising by the minute. We have a $7.1 trillion annual budget, only $5 trillion of which is even paid for, leaving us with a $2+ trillion annual deficit. How, you ask? Is that even possible? How are we losing $2+ trillion a year? Well, we have $4 trillion in mandatory spending, $1 trillion in military spending, another trillion in discretionary spending, and then the big fat elephant in the room, $1 trillion more on interest alone, which brings us to Tuesday. This coming Tuesday, in 2 days from today, the Fed's next FOMC meeting. 8 times a year, the Fed's Board of Governors meet. They convene to decide the future of our country's monetary policy. The Federal Reserve, though, not even part of our federal government, not part of our 3 branches of government, legislative, executive, or judicial. It's not in the Federalist Papers. The Federal Reserve shouldn't even legally exist. In 1913, a private consortium of banks lobbied Congress, and in a quorum call with only 3 senators present, passed the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, doing so when all other senators were on vacation with their families. On that night, the big banks were able to successfully hijack our nation, folks. For 110 years, the Fed's been keeping their thumb on the scale. Their meetings, all of them, taking place behind closed doors. Nobody knows what's really said or how or why they're coming to these decisions. They release these phony Fed minutes assuming that we're stupid. So we have this quasi-independent agency that's accountable to nobody with 26,000 employees paid for by you, the taxpayer, and yet there's no public input allowed. Americans aren't allowed to hear why they're fixing the night rate, putting their thumb on the scale, preventing you from buying a house, affording a mortgage. Enough. We've had enough. All of this, though, may be about to change. Finally, a federal judge yesterday granting a request for an emergency hearing Monday, 1 day before the Fed's next closed-door meeting. The judge calling this emergency hearing to decide if she'll grant a temporary restraining order blocking Jerome Powell's Fed from meeting behind closed doors. Watch.
Back. Speaking of news, we have breaking news even as we speak. Very serendipitous that you're here. Walk us through what just broke across the tape, sir.
Well, we just heard from the federal judge in our lawsuit against Jerome Powell that we filed this morning. Just as a reminder, we filed a lawsuit against Jerome Powell for breaking federal law by holding the Federal Reserve's rate-setting meetings behind closed door that contravenes the Government and the Sunshine Act of 1976. We asked the federal court, very simply, to block next week's Fed meeting from happening in secret. We just heard from the federal judge. She handed down the order, which is that there's going to be an emergency hearing on this on Monday afternoon at 2 p.m. in the D.C. federal courthouse. This is Judge Jerome Powell.
Realize this is unheard of. Never in more than 110 years has the Fed been pressured like this, forced to explain their actions. For weeks, we've seen a whole of government approach led by President Trump to come down like a hammer on Jerome Powell, put him and the Fed under the microscope, put them in their place. Realize the Federal Reserve is above the law. They answer to nobody. Even the President of the United States has no authority over what they do, according to Jerome Powell.
Hi, Victoria Guido with Politico. Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No. Said it again.
Okay, thank you. I guess the other question is, to follow up on Victoria's question, do you believe the president has the power to fire or demote you, and has the Fed determined the legality of a president demoting at will any of the other governors with leadership positions?
Not permitted under the law.
Not what?
Not permitted under the law.
Thank you.
Now, that may technically be true, but you know what the president can do? He can end the Fed through an act of Congress. He can also use the power of his office to make sure that they fall in line, which is exactly what they're doing. The last few weeks, we've seen everything and anything from the administration coming down on Powell, calling for his resignation. We've seen Congress referring him to DOJ for criminal prosecution for what they say is perjury, lying under oath to Congress. We've also seen them expose Powell for these massive cost overruns in his new office building. Trump deciding to drop in for a personal face-to-face with Powell, an unexpected meeting to see firsthand where our $3.1 billion is going.
President, are there things the chairman can say to you today that would make you back off some of the earlier criticism?
Well, I'd love him to lower interest rates. Other than that, what can I tell you?
And the press blowing up over that meeting, screaming about Fed independence. Look, there's a good argument that the Fed shouldn't even exist, but that's a whole different story altogether. The bottom line is, will Jerome Powell get the message? Will he capitulate and cut rates on Tuesday? Well, we're about to find out. This is something that needs to happen. 100% must happen. If you recall, Doge was supposed to be the Lord and Savior. I think we all hoped that Doge would deliver and cut 1 to 2 trillion in waste, fraud, and abuse. Unfortunately, that's not happening. The Trump administration pulling back from that effort, settling with around 200 billion in cuts, which is better than nothing, but a long way from $1 trillion. Elon walking away right before Doge was set to tackle the Pentagon. Why the Pentagon always seems to skate by, I have no idea. Meanwhile, we have around 10 trillion in treasuries set to mature in the next 6 to 9 months. $10 trillion in debt that needs to be refinanced. If those 10 trillion in treasury notes were to mature at current rates, we'd be looking at over $1 trillion a year more in interest, which is quite frankly unacceptable.
As good as we're doing, think of how well we'd be doing. We'd be like a rocket ship. As good as we're doing, we'd do better if we had lower interest rates. And we should. We're prime. Don't forget, without us, the whole world collapses. So we should have the lowest interest rate because, you can talk about Switzerland, you can talk about wonderful countries, no debt, but without us, everything collapses. We should have the lowest interest rate. And if you took it down 3 points, not a little bit, but 3 points, if you got us down to 1, we would save more than $1 trillion, basically with just a paper transfer. You wouldn't be cutting costs of anything. You wouldn't be building anything. Just a move of the hand saying we're going to lower interest rates. You would save $1 trillion a year. And there's nothing you can do to save that kind of money.
Americans are waking up to the fact that the Federal Reserve is private, they're run for profit, and they're owned by these big private banks. And they've been sucking up the economic future of Americans, everyday Americans, all to keep the train running, doing so in this crony capitalistic, huge transfer of wealth. So let me know what you think. Will Jerome Powell and these Fed governors cut rates on Tuesday? Because the betting markets, they say no. They say they will not capitulate. Polymarket has a 95% chance we'll see no change to the night rate at all on Tuesday. Only a 3.6% chance we'll see a 25 basis point cut. That's it, a 3.6% chance. Realize if they don't cut rates, big time and fast, they're going to be costing us an additional $1 trillion a year in interest expense for Lord knows how long. Not to mention keeping it virtually unaffordable to buy a house or get a mortgage. Let me know your thoughts. And look, this is why we've been seeing record investment flooding into these alternative asset classes, commodities, especially gold. Gold this year, gold has surged 28.59%, over 28% so far in 2025, while the US dollar has been falling like a rock, down 9% to a 3-year low. Silver also on fire, hitting nearly 14-year highs, and mining stocks are exploding. The GLDG index up nearly 60% this year. Major banks forecasting big gains as well. JP Morgan expecting gold to reach $4,000 per ounce by Q2 2026. Goldman Sachs agreeing, predicting $4,000 by mid-2026. Bank of America expecting gold to hit $4,000 and silver to soar to $40 per ounce in 2026. Even saying silver potentially outperforming gold this year. Yet despite this surge in the price of metal, many gold mining stocks haven't followed suit. For some investors, this disconnect could represent a big opportunity. As you could see in this graph, gold stocks have this tremendous gap to close compared to gold spot price, which has soared. Companies with strong project portfolios and solid financial structures may be well positioned if investor sentiment begins to shift back toward the sector. Which brings me to today's sponsor, GoldMining Inc. This video is disseminated by GoldMining Inc. You can see their ticker on the screen, GLDG, trading on the New York Stock Exchange, a company that I'm going to profile for you today and provide some information on. GoldMining Inc. trading around 80 cents today as of July 21st, 2025, about the same price as February 2019 when gold was less than half today's price. Despite record high gold prices, GLDG trading near its 6-year low, presenting a potential undervalued opportunity. And this isn't just any other junior miner. Gold Mining owns one of the largest gold and gold copper resource stage mineral portfolios in the Americas. We're talking some dozen projects across 5 countries located in pro-mining jurisdictions in Canada, the USA, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, with an estimated 12.4 million ounces of gold equivalent in the measured and indicated category, and an additional 9.1 million ounces of gold equivalent in the inferred category. And wait, the company doesn't just own resource stage mineral properties, it also has a portfolio of publicly traded equities and cash. This is important. Their publicly traded equity holdings alone are worth over 157 million US based on the market closing prices of those securities on July 21st, 2025. Plus, they hold 4.4 million US in cash and equivalents of their last reported quarter and financials on May 31st, 2025, and they have no debt. Let me say that again, no debt. Gold Mining is advancing key projects such as its São Jorge project in Brazil, where they've launched the company's largest ever exploration program, a critical move given the industry-wide challenge of reserve replacement as major producers deplete reserves rapidly. The company has just initiated the largest exploration program in the history of the company at the São Jorge, as we see this plus 1 grams per ton open pit resource with regional growth potential in a 46,000 hectare land package. So size, quality, and location do matter, folks. The gold mining portfolio includes increasingly scarce large-scale gold and gold copper projects in mining-friendly jurisdictions. Just what the major operators will need to replenish reserves mined through production. These are large-scale projects in safe jurisdictions with infrastructure advantages and a management team with real deep experience in building value over time. Gold Mining's leadership stacked with mining veterans, including former Goldcorp CEO David Garofalo and serial entrepreneur Amir Adani. Insiders owning over 10 million shares, showing strong alignment with their shareholders. And lastly, look at the key shareholders of Gold Mining Inc. Like the who's who, top institutional investors like BlackRock, Sprott, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, and the GDXJ Index ETF hold significant stakes, signaling confidence in GLDG's long-term potential. So if you want exposure to gold through a company with strong leverage to the gold price, an undervalued asset base, in my opinion, including publicly traded equities and resource stage properties, a pipeline of development projects, and a strong institutional and insider backing, GoldMining Inc. deserves a closer look. As always, though, make sure you review GoldMining's public filings for important information regarding its projects, including its most recent annual information form and technical reports that are referenced in them. These are all available at sadarplus.ca. Check out GoldMining, ticker symbol GLDG, and visit their website, goldmining.com. And always do your own research. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.